Today we welcome Richard Freeborn, former VP of Global Talent Acquisition and Global Employee Experience at Adidas. With extensive experience at BNP Paribas, Barclays and BP, Richard led a team of 250 professionals at Adidas, delivering over 10,000 hires annually. Joining Richard are Harry Bigwood, CEO and founder of the Rec Hub, and Rex Rusling, co-founder and director of new partnerships at the Rec Hub. They will discuss the rapid changes in talent acquisition and the challenges TA professionals face, such as evolving skills needs, Gen Z considerations, and remote work dynamics.
Well, welcome back to another episode of the Powered by People podcast. We are joined by, Rex and I are joined by Richard Freeborn. And we're going to be talking a lot about, this wasn't set up either. Richard had written an article of his own free will around permanent interim, a new mindset for talent acquisition. Obviously, it's potentially closely linked to sort of the more fractional world and embedded comes into that. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that article. But first and foremost, we're going to get to know Richard a little bit better. Firstly, Richard, thanks for joining us.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too. How do you unwind?
So several things. One, football. Although I was just saying earlier, unfortunately, my team is Watford and they lose the vast majority of games. So that tends to ruin my weekends and the weekends of everybody around me. Secondly, music. So I'm a failed music graduate, so still very much into my music. And then third thing is tomorrow I get a puppy.
I'll tell you right now, that will be zero unwinding for at least the first year.
No, because I am in charge of like cuddles and breaking.
Yeah, okay.
My husband is in charge of training and looking after it, so that's fine.
I swear talent acquisition is littered with failed musicians, artists, actors.
And every other career choice.
Sports people.
By the time nothing else is left, we move into TA.
Yeah, exactly. I do completely vibe with that. So I started golf in order to unwind and find an avenue to de-stress. And at first it was working perfectly. I had no care. I was hitting the balls, and then I started to get good. And then it became a bigger frustration when you didn't do well, that it actually became more stressful to do golf than to not do golf. So completely understand that.
Yeah,
what do you do, Rex?
Well, I mean, I used to do a lot of like running, things like that. Less so now. Ruptured my Achilles 2 months ago, so that's basically me on the bench until the end of the summer.
Yeah.
But my wife actually recently suggested that we go and do like pottery classes. Now, I understand why she thinks that's not going to be stressful. If I went on my own, it wouldn't be stressful. If I go with her, it's a competition.
Yeah.
So,
but you just got to let her win.
I mean,
You're that competitive.
That's not.
You want to crush your wife.
Yeah. Well, she beat me at squash. Look what happened last time.
Question number 2. One habit you wish you could stop and one that you could start.
One habit I wish.
That can be a devious question now.
Yeah.
One habit I wish I could stop: waking up early in the mornings. So,
I do not have that, unfortunately.
so I think like most of my career has been in banking. So you're drilled, or at least years ago in banking, you were drilled to be in the office quite early. So even when I'm not working, and even weekends or a Sunday, I'll wake up probably between 5:30, 6:30 every day, religiously, and that is probably grounds for divorce, but so waking up early, wish I could get out of that habit. One habit I wish I could get into: eating healthily. We were talking about food earlier. My diet, atrocious. It's basically the less healthy it is, the better I'll eat it. Yeah, exactly.
What about you, Rex?
So if I could break one habit, that would be at the end of the day, just putting on Netflix or something like that. It's just a thing that you don't need to do.
Yeah.
And if I could start a habit, it would probably be a bit more discipline around reading things that are not self-help books or sales books or things like that, but more reading for fictional stories.
Yeah, my wife reads a lot.
Yeah.
I've got ADD. I'll get two pages in and I'm jumping 3 chapters to see what's happening later, and then I just put the book down and never look at it again.
I'll only read if I can fit it, get it through in about 2 days.
Yeah.
If I'm on holiday and I can read the book from start to finish in about 2 or 3 days, then I'll do it. But trying to do it whilst working and stuff like that, and it takes a month or two, I lose interest.
Yeah, so a guilty pleasure show you watch?
Oh God, what don't I watch? Probably guilty pleasure show. Location.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, I love a bit of Kirsty and Phil.
Yeah.
There was when I was in Germany, we couldn't get location. That was a real downside of living in Germany with Adidas. But I love nosing at other people. It's not so much about sort of aspirationally seeing what properties are out there. It's nosing in at other people's lives, understanding their situations, why they want property X or property Y.
Is that the same show where they get to either remodel their house or find a new one?
That's another one by the
same people,
yeah.
same Kirsty, is it?
Yeah. I love it. I love
brilliant.
it. I love just the feeling of interfering, and being able to see everything, all the warts and bad things about their lives, also all the good things. But and I love it when it makes me sound like an awful person. I love it when there's friction between the couple. Person one really wants something, person two doesn't, and I love seeing through the program who has to make the compromise. In the end,
Richard's obsessed with drama. He's loving the drama.
Yeah,
brilliant. If you could join another team for a day, which would it be and why?
Oh, another HR team.
Yeah, I'm gonna another department's team,
like a function.
Mine would just always be marketing. They seem to do cool shit.
I'm sorry. I think marketing's pretty boring.
Oh, Rosie. Podcast over.
What would I do? Okay, this sounds really boring, yeah? Because most of my career's been in banking, so I'd love to be part of like an M&A team.
Yeah, actually, that would be really cool.
You mean so that you're doing the big deals?
The big deals.
The big deals, or... if we're talking about sort of super complex businesses, I'd like to be sort of like a sort of economic policy advisor who's all into, making reaction and commentary on all the political goings on economy and stuff like that. But probably M&A.
Probably I'd be too involved in the conspiracy theories to get anywhere on the economic geopolitics.
I think PR or being in the communications team would be really fun.
Yeah, depends on what business.
Yeah,
because you could be really boring.
Yeah.
Good. I wouldn't have thought of M&A. I think that's a really good idea.
I think one of my big... I've always considered myself a bit of a numbers person.
Have you been watching Billions and that's it?
I love Billions, Succession.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Succession. I love...
I'm sure that's exactly how it is as well.
Yes.
Final question, dream holiday destination.
Well, I probably had it actually. So in between jobs, when I wrapped up at Adidas, I went to South Africa and we did the whole safari, Cape Town, and then wine region. Safari for me was just mind blowing.
Yeah,
I was sure I was going to be eaten, but it was amazing. Absolutely.
Did you, when you went to South Africa, did you get in the shark cage?
Absolutely never. We've never. Value my life. I would be that 1 in 1 million person.
The shark gets it.
There's a hole in the cage or something like that. That no one notices and it swims through and sort of eats me alive or something like that.
That is it. That's my exact dream holiday destination is safari.
But when you do the safari, don't you camp out and you can hear all the wildlife at night? Isn't that pretty terrifying as well? Because at least you can see the shark coming.
It was. So literally, I remember my first night in safari, we had a great guide or whatever you call them. And the first nighttime safari, he turned all the lights down. We were like, what's happening? He didn't tell us. And then suddenly we parked. We could hear sort of Rusty turn the lights on. And there were 2 female lions and cubs right next to us. It was just awesome.
It's once in a lifetime experience.
Yeah, it really was. We just had the best time in South Africa. I know you've been. Have you been to?
No,
you have to. You have to. It's amazing.
It was going to be. It was always my my honeymoon.
Yeah.
Dream destination that I could just never afford.
Yeah.
One day.
What would it be? So that would be yours, Harry?
Yeah, 100% safari.
I'd quite like to go the other way and go north, actually. I'd love to see the Northern Lights, not from the UK when there's a solar flare, but actually
the real ones.
Yeah, the real ones, and do
Aurora Borealis.
yeah, that's it, Aurora Borealis.
Borealis, that's it. Yeah.
That could be right, could be wrong. Any Latin speakers?
I
out
did
there,
2
let us know.
weeks. I did 2 weeks in Iceland in November. Nothing.
Didn't see it.
Nothing.
We did Iceland about 4 or 5 years ago. We didn't see it. Yeah.
You know, the winter time is supposed to be the time. So like November, December, January's just nothing.
But if I'd love to go up to sort of Finland around Christmas time when the kids are still young enough to believe in Father Christmas and things like
That's
that.
cute.
That would be quite cool.
Yeah. That's a little bit magical.
Yeah. So well, there you go. That's a little bit of an insight to Richard. Now we're going to get into permanent interim, a new TA mindset.
Yeah, so I guess just straight off the bat, I read an article, Richard, which you'd written about a year ago, which was very apt considering what the Rec Hub does, and totally not set up, as Harry says.
Yeah, we didn't pay it, promise.
Not yet. I'll take the check later. Yeah.
But for anyone
Royalties pending.
But for anyone who's not read it, I was hoping you could maybe just start by telling us what you mean by adopting a state.
And we'll share a link to the article with the podcast as well.
So permanent interim for me was I think you're right. I wrote it about 8-9 months ago or so, and was talking about the mindset shift in TA and actually a bit of HR functions in terms of, for me, there's 3 big changes going on in the TA space at the moment. So one, which is the obvious one, I think, when alluding to this title, is the volatility and unpredictability in the macro world at the moment, which is making businesses much harder to forecast appropriately. So I think we're seeing greater swings and more volatility and less predictability in the hiring patterns, particularly actually of the larger organizations. That's part one of it. Part two is just the pace of change in tech and the way TA functions are operating at the moment. I'm a big believer. I think AI is going to be as big a shift as it was when the ATS first came out 30 or 40 years ago. There's so much technology opportunity for TA. And then the third thing is, I think the expectations of TA functions is incrementally increasing in terms of the expectations from the business stakeholders.
Do more with less,
strategic advice, market intelligence, all of that. So you've got these 3 things happening, I think, at once at a faster pace than have ever happened. Unpredictability in macro market, technological change, and then the expectations, which in my view means that TA functions and arguably wider HR functions can't ever get into this place of static and predictability. So you need to have this, what I call a permanent interim mindset, that actually the change that you implement in your TA function is change for now. We're going to incrementally change that throughout. So it came about when I was at Adidas. We were doing a big operating model shift. And the big challenge I had with all of our stakeholders all the time was, so you're gonna land this model, and that's going to be it for the next 3 or 4 years. I was like, no. This model is going to be a framework. It's going to be, it's going to set up some principles, some ways of working. It's going to be built, against what I would say is a business as usual year. But we're going to have levers to shift incrementally throughout going forward. So this idea that you sort of unfreeze, implement change, and then freeze it again in TA functions is impossible. So that was a very long-winded answer, but hopefully that explains what I mean.
I think it really does. And it also goes hand in hand with this idea of 3 to 5 year workforce plans. Immediately, you go into something knowing that you need to shake it up in 3 to 5 years. And it reminds me of a phrase that people used to say a lot. Do you remember up to about 2020, people always spoke about the future of work?
Yeah.
And we always spoke about what's the future of work? And we were looking for like this, what's it going to be? What's the permanent state of the future of work? And now no one talks about the future of work.
He's constantly evolving. He's constantly changing.
Yeah.
Exactly. 3 years ago, people saying the future of work is completely working remote. Now you look at the banking sector, and they're all coming back into the office.
Exactly.
It goes in cycles. It's changing all the time. And in terms of hiring planning, everybody post-COVID went through this huge hiring boom, and then suddenly everybody started contracting their hiring volumes again. The ability to predict either the future of work or workforce planning or other aspects in HR, no one expected AI was going to be, it was always there in the background.
Yeah.
It's never going to be such a big deal until suddenly 12 months ago is all anybody
GDT came
it's all anybody
into
talked
the
about.
market, yeah.
Exactly.
I think something that's interesting around that is so I often hear people talking about TA and the business.
Mhm.
I don't like talking about it that way because I think TA is part of the business, and we drive value in the same way that a design engineer creates tools or a developer creates a checkout page. We are the ones who ensure the business has the talent to meet the business goals. So if business goals are going to shift every couple of years,
So should the TA team's ability to deliver against it.
Exactly. Should have a conversation at the front of the conversation. So too often, what happens is the business will sign off a future plan
without consulting with TA.
Exactly.
Yeah.
TA will come in at the back end of the process. But in terms of if you want to build out a unit, grow something, shrink something, nearshore something, offshore something, TA should be involved
100%
to that conversation. Because otherwise you make mistakes. I'm not going to say which. I remember one of the firms that I worked at in the past. They built this big plan. Okay, we're going to offshore XYZ to a certain location. They had the strategy office do some of the market intelligence and things like that. Came to TA retrospectively, all delivered that, signed off. I was just like, but what have you? It was ludicrous because when you dug into it, the talent that they were looking at hiring in that location didn't exist. Potential to grow it over 3 to 5 years, but they wanted some pretty senior folk to go in and set this office up.
Yeah.
It was impossible. So TA absolutely needs to be at the forefront.
I was gonna comment on your third point around expectations and the expectations to become more strategic business partners. I think it's a really exciting transition for talent acquisition because we joked earlier, everyone in recruitment, which is now talent acquisition, have failed at something or stepped into this as a wild card, as a career choice. And now it's actually becoming a choice that people want to get into as a career. We're seeing many, many more CPOs be appointed coming from a talent background, whereas traditionally it was a CHRO or a CPO was from a HR background. Talent is becoming a much more pivotal strategic partner at the table, and that's having that for people going into the workforce and seeing recruitment as a path to sort of the C-suite. I think is generating much more respect for those in their infancy in talent acquisition now as well.
Yeah, but what is fundamentally, if you're running a business unit, what is the most important tool that you have? It's the team that you manage. If you think, you can try and grow them, you can try and reskill them, you can bring in technology and things like that. But the starting point is how good is the team that I manage? And that starts with TA.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You can't, if you hire the wrong people in, you can only do so much with that starting point. Even if you've got the best talent development, learning and development, whatever else, internal mobility to bring other people from other areas, you need that best talent in the organization. For me, it's the building blocks of anything. Really.
Yeah.
I think it's when you're looking at embracing this idea of permanent interim, a lot of it's about protecting the downside. So how can you create as much impact as possible whilst retaining the agility to completely change plan as things shift?
Well, what used to happen, if I look 10, 15 years ago, is organizations would still grow and shrink in cycles. But it was much slower because the world was much slower. Things were much predictable. It was much easier to be like, okay, we're going to grow our organization by 20%. We've got time to build up the TA function in-house to do that. Now, the volatility, because of the dynamic world that we live in, everything going on, it's much shorter reaction time. And therefore, you can't just build this in-house TA function because, it's like in-house TA function, particularly large TA teams like Adidas or BNP Paribas, is like a shipping tanker, and you need your speedboats on the side that you can switch on really fast, or change locations or repoint in different directions. And so the move, I think that the days of having an entirely in-house TA team are gone, and now we're moving to, or I think most organizations are moving to, a nimble in-house team with then the levers externally to try and flex up and down, be that technology, be that embedded TA, be that RPO, be that search firms or whatever else. And it's about having those levers ready, having the business understanding the impact and the choices between those levers as well. So, for instance, if you've got a business as usual in-house TA team, that's built against hiring 10,000 hires a year, but suddenly business X or business segment X within your organization wants to grow. Well, what are the choices? Choice one is, okay, we could build the in-house TA team again, but that's going to be really slow. It's probably going to be relatively cost efficient in the short term, cost inefficient in the long term, because you're either going to have to relocate these people eventually or whatever else, but it's going to be slow. And then you've got your various other options. You've got either search firms or recruitment agencies, you've got embedded TA, you've got RPO, and it's about having those conversations with the business where they understand the pros, cons, and the financial impact as well. So I'm a big believer that the business should own the cost of TA, and I think that's how you invite them to the conversation and around the table in a much more active presence. My personal preference, and I told you I'd go off on tangents, is to run TA as almost a cost zero cost center where the business is funding it and understand the costs.
Such a different perspective. Yeah, because and I don't know, we have this conversation often. I'm not sure whether there's for maybe slightly more, newer leaders to the talent world have a point to prove or an ego or that is still sort of developing. But there's often a desire to own their own budget, to have this money that they can spend, but then also to have their in-house team as big as possible. Yeah. And it's kind of, for some people, it's kind of irrelevant what the impact is that they're having, because for so long we were just recruiters, sit over there, recruit, or a service-driven part of the business. Whereas now we are strategic, now we are impactful, and we're getting autonomy, we're getting the ability to make decisions and be a part of decisions. That it's, I've got a big team. Yeah. It's kind of irrelevant what impact you're having for some conversations. And rather than like, I've got a team of 3 and we're delivering massive ROI, we're delivering huge impact. I could have a team of 200 and be delivering 0 impact. Yeah. But the team of 200, you'd be considered a stronger leader. Yeah. And that's where I think we're transitioning to impact over headcount.
Do you think that's more about what goes on? That's about ego and what goes on my CV. Is like I've led a team of 100.
I think we're seeing much more of this mindset in more mature leaders now, where it's about, we want to have an impact on the organization. We want to drive ROI and value through the people that we're bringing in, not just how many heads are in the TA team.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, but also, be it RPO, embedded TA, whatever else, they should be facing to the business like they are part of the in-house team.
Yes.
For the business 100%. Stakeholder perspective, they shouldn't notice any difference. Yeah. Now, there might be cost differences or whatever else, but that's in the background. But from a service perspective, it should be seamless.
Yeah, agree. I think because at the end of the day, it's your strategy, your decision to bring them in. So it should be a feather in your cap and your win when they deliver well. And so for that to happen effectively, they need to interface into the business.
The one big shift that I don't think many HR functions or some TA leaders, but not all TA leaders, are really grappling with is it's a very different skill set to manage an in-house TA team versus an RPO or embedded TA provider. Because suddenly you're talking about all these procurement skills. Yeah. You're talking about managing vendors. You're talking about SLAs, KPIs, how you manage that vendor. It's very different from managing an in-house team. And I think this is a shift. I mean, we're going way off topic now, but I told you I would. It's a very different skill set in terms of how you manage these external vendors. And I think it's really showing in terms of, normally this career path is quite linear. In TA, come in as, coordinator, then, I don't know what you call it, but, recruiter, senior recruiter, recruitment manager, et cetera, et cetera. But as you start to outsource more TA to have that flexibility, it's actually a completely different skill set.
100%. Where do you? I mean, we've gone way off tangent here. I might skip right past workforce planning, but
we're coming back to that.
But if you look at that, then what would you say are probably the most important signposts or pitfalls or amber flags, whatever it is, for a TA leader when they're trying to manage a mix of in-house and augmented support?
Oh, that's a good question.
Straight off the cuff.
Yeah.
Just,
So the pitfalls, I think, first of all, it's to have this, what I call the permanent interim, but have this agile mindset.
Yeah.
I think it's this ability to flex and try different things, I think is really important. I think having the business in the right place as a partner is also really important because
trust behind the business.
Yeah,
And the decision.
because I get it. If I'm talking to particularly a senior stakeholder, yeah, and we're saying, okay, we aren't going to do that. This big project you've got to grow Hub X in a certain location, we aren't going to do that in-house. We're going to bring an external vendor. If you're a business leader, your heart kind of sinks initially because you're like, hold on, you aren't doing it in-house. You don't care about it. I'm not going to get the high-touch service that I'm used to. So you really need your business leaders to be bought in and understand why you're bringing in partner X or Y and involved in the decision to select them as well.
would you do that? Would you bring in stakeholders from
Yes.
completely different departments, like the finance department or sales team or CTO, to come and meet potential partners to get their buy-in?
So at my previous organization, we moved. Like I said earlier, we implemented a brand new operating model, and that operating model was a number of things. But at the heart of it, it was to build an in-house team for corporate hiring against business as usual volumes, and then to bring in the right external vendors to flex up and flex down for the retail side of the business. So for stores, that was the most, in my view, the most complex and challenging part of the business because you've got all these A, local linguistic skills, B, huge volatility and seasonality, and C, really quick growth and decline in terms of the footprint depending on market appetite at any one time. So we decided to go almost fully outsourced for that store hiring. And absolutely at the forefront, it was building a steering committee with representation A from the business, but also from the procurement function, from the tech function. And it was a real collaborative journey. And that's the only way to do it because, again, there are some stakeholders that are more open-minded, but generally, if you're a stakeholder and you come at the end and you say, TA or me as a TA leader says, okay, right, we've got your business demand, we're going to bring in XYZ provider to deliver it all, and they haven't been on that journey with you, disaster.
They've got to believe in it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people move towards this idea of a centre of excellence to try and retain that trust that everything's still going to be as expected.
And look, stuff still has to be in-house. So I'm a big believer of your business as usual, being in-house. Your exec hiring, your early careers hiring, I generally believe is predominantly in-house. If you've got a big function, you've probably got an employer branding part as well. I think the core elements in-house, but it's about having those right partners lined up for either business segment, geography, volatility, whichever else it is, to deliver alongside.
How do you think TA teams can best collaborate with other departments and other business units?
Yeah. Within the company, I think first of all it's understanding what I call your SPOC model, so your single point of contact. Okay. So it gets really, particularly in large organizations, most of my career has been a pretty big corporates. It gets really confusing for a business leader if they're dealing with person X for one geography, person Y for another geography, person Z for early careers, person A for exec search. And suddenly they've got, even for TA alone, they've got 4 or 5 different points of contact. Then you factor in, they've also got a different point of contact from a talent management perspective. They've got a different HRBP contact. At certain times of the year, they've got rewards contact. So from a TA function perspective, for me, it's about streamlining that singular point of contact they have. Once they've got that one go-to person who hopefully is selected because they have a genuine interest in whichever business that business leader is leading, you get involved into the really detailed conversations. But for me, I can't even remember what the question was now, but it starts with that single point of contact. And lots of TA functions are really, really messy.
Yeah.
Because particularly when you're talking at board level, at board level, most organizations are set up by global functions.
Yeah.
Most TA functions are set up region first because you're market-led. So if all your TA function is set up regional first, but your board is set up global functional, they've got tens or they've got multiple stakeholders to deal with. So you need these single points of contact.
That's a great shout. Yeah.
Well.
I guess from our perspective, 100% of what we do is TA, and so we can get a bit blinkered in the fact that actually our stakeholders are looking for an experience, and what we think we spend 100% of our time on might be 15-20% of what they spend their time on.
Yeah.
So they don't want millions of people to deal with.
It needs to be streamlined, and HR as a function is generally, when it comes to stakeholder time, HR is a greedy function. Yeah, you've got, if you think about the finance department, in a big in-house corporate, you've generally got one finance partner dealing with a function. Yeah,
they don't want to speak to you.
Yeah, exactly. But you've usually got 5 or 6 HR contacts clamoring for time with this person, and it also becomes more complex, and particularly post-COVID, but even since then, there's been this real shift, and I think a good shift in organizations, that it's not just about hiring talent in, it's about reskilling, retraining, moving talent around the organization. And that really is a not even a handshake, it's a synergy between your talent management and your TA function. So I think we're seeing more and more integrated talent functions, bringing those together as well.
And that is a lovely segue into workforce planning. So when you're talking about adopting permanent interim mindset, how do you then approach workforce planning?
With difficulty. I think
I don't think I've had many conversations with many organisations that really have nailed this. It's such a difficult.
Well, I mean, here we go. I'll ask you a question, and me and how you're answering it. But what I think is interesting is one of the first questions I speak to business leaders, talent acquisition leaders about, is what are the business's challenges? Where do you need support? Where are bottlenecks? And it's often done. The answer I scarcely get back is around skills in the business, where the pockets are that need to grow. It's almost like the workforce planning gets skipped over, and we're just talking about headcount requirements straight away.
And this is the thing. I think particularly, I think you're spot on. So a lot of people, when they talk workforce planning, they enter a conversation which I would call hiring forecast planning over the short term, 6 months or so, or even worse, FTE planning. So it becomes a budget conversation about, okay, finance have said I have to reduce my FTE by 5%, or my overall working budget by 7%. That equates to an FTE reduction of this. And it becomes a very spreadsheet conversation. It becomes a spreadsheet. And I think that has been magnified since COVID again, or even particularly since COVID, because most businesses are in this real short-term focus about what they're doing. It's stop, start, grow, shrink, react, rather than these conversations, as you said, about skills over 3, 5, 10 years plus. So what skills can we grow? What skills can we retrain? What skills do we have hidden in the organization that we don't know about already? And then what skills do we need to either hire in or whatever else?
Do you think you should always approach workforce planning with the talent team?
In an ideal world, but it depends the maturity of the organization you're in. So in the ideal sort of utopia that it is, you've got this really joined up talent management and TA function and HRBP function, because they're the third. They're the third wheel, and then the business is the fourth wheel in these conversations. So you've got business, HRBP, talent management, TA working together, thinking long term, thinking about what do we need to buy in terms of hiring, what can we grow, what can we retrain, what can we move, and it's this long term conversation. But in reality, like I say, particularly post COVID, certainly I found it at both my previous organisation, but a number of organisations that I talked to, it's very short term and it's very tactical and it's very reactive at the moment. And I think apart from the leading organisations, I think it's going to be like that for a little bit longer.
So when we talk about workforce planning in this time of permanent interim, these short-term plans is because everyone's had to be reactive to pandemics, wars, things like that. So if that's the new norm, then we need to develop a way to start workforce planning and in maybe in more of a reactive way.
And building in tolerance. So this is the thing, people, proactivity and tolerance, because people think, when they do a workforce plan, be that a sophisticated workforce plan or an FTE analysis, then that's it, signed off, and you build this static function, and there's no tolerance or flexibility built on it. And it's an understanding, when I was doing, I guess, basic hiring planning, back in even New York, 5-6 years ago, I went into that and I was fairly certain, that, okay, I'm going to build some flexibility in my TA operating model, but it's going to be plus or minus, 5% either way. Now it could be plus or minus 20 or 30% either way. At one of my previous organizations, I remember one year being about 35% higher than the next year. And how do you build that in your in-house model? You can't. You can't. And that's why, and again, we've gone round in circles because I like going off on tangents, but it's why you then put your external levers in place to manage that, essentially.
I think it's a good segue, because obviously one tool that's going to support all of these potential challenges is artificial intelligence.
And first, I'm going to do a little bit of a boring answer about AI. People jump on AI and they see it as an opportunity to reduce or streamline or juniorize TA functions. Actually, it's a huge opportunity to elevate, because the operational efficiency that comes through it should allow you to start having those much more strategic conversations. The other thing I would say about AI is it's only as good as the end user. Yeah. So, and it wasn't my quote. It was actually someone in the business at Adidas said this to me once, and I've stolen it ever since. Think of AI as the best ever intern you've ever hired. Yeah. Super smart, super brainy, going to produce this wonderful, deck or whatever. But if your intern was producing a deck that's going to go to a board member, you'd never have them produce it and then have someone who knows what they're talking about check it over. And the same goes with AI in TA. You can use all these tools, Eightfold, Beamery, whatever else, to help rank candidates, screen candidates, bring in external pipelines. But you need a recruiter at the end of that process who understands what they're doing, who can sense check it. I think 3 opportunities I would like to see TA leaders using more of AI to do. One is embracing it as part of the assessment process. So, for instance, let's talk about early careers, which is where I spent a lot of my time at the beginning of my career. And we talk about assessment centers for early, which is usually the final stage assessment for early careers talent. Well, instead of getting them to do the case study or whatever else with the sort of pen or whatever, put a laptop in front of them and give them the AI tool like they would actually have in their day job and see what comes out of those assessment centers. So I think throwing AI into assessment centers and giving it as a tool to candidates in assessment centers, I think would be a lot of fun. Second thing I'd like to see TA leaders using more AI for is actually recruitment marketing and creative. So in corporate marketing, I differentiate employer branding and corporate marketing. More and more organizations are starting to use AI to create their creative content. And I think there's a real opportunity for more innovation and also, to be frank, cost reduction to start using AI in the creative process to create recruitment marketing.
That's if you've got budget for recruitment marketing. Because it doesn't. It seems like a luxury for many businesses.
That's nothing. Again, you need someone who's sensible at the end of that process to sense check it, because you don't want to, put an image of an employee on an AI generated advert and suddenly they've got 3 legs or something because no one's checked it. And then the third thing I'd like to see AI used for in TA teams is learning and development for recruiters. So there's a huge opportunity to start using AI to train and upskill TA individuals, even if it's a case of, okay, Richard, you're currently a recruiter for the global markets division at BNP Paribas, but we're going to switch you and you're going to start hiring for M&A. Well, actually, great way for Richard to learn about M&A is to hop on to AI to get some basic, some basic training that doesn't take too much time as well.
I think that you touched on something really interesting there, which is how to use it in assessment. And I would be quite interested to see how AI could potentially scrape the web and tell us what skills we have and skill gaps we have in an organization. Because when you go on something like LinkedIn Talent Insights, of course it can pick stuff up through job titles and keywords in people's profiles. But if it could scrape the whole of the internet, it could hopefully massively fast track the whole process of telling you what skills and skill gaps you've got in an organization, and that could really speed up the workforce planning situation. And
outside TA, sorry. So at Adidas, part of my job was leading the TA function. Part of my job was leading what we called employee experience.
Okay, cool.
And within that, we had all the people analytics, people data, people insights, people listening. And we used, I shouldn't say what technology, but we used a technology.
Feel free, plug it.
They have to pay me first. But we used a technology that was starting to use, so our employee listening data. We had about 40,000 employees completed, and we were quite hardcore on the listening. There were lots and lots of questions, and we were starting, or there was a provider starting to use AI to help HRBPs understand that data, and that was super interesting. But again, comes in circles and touches on what you said, that the HRBP needed to really understand the data and what was being given to him or her. From the
if you're an organization with 100,000 employees, you need to be able to derive insights from all the staff quicker, so that can feed into retention as well. And I think what is a sort of hidden benefit is that not even necessarily about your own organization, but if you know what you need to hire for, then AI can hopefully fast track the ability to tell you where you should be hiring as well. So it could, for example, tell you that, you've got a plan to increase the size of the finance team X. Actually, not needed. You can do it in this country because we know from all these institutions in the area, you could hire all these people quickly and cheaper.
Anywhere where it's analysing large data sets, isn't it, is going to be better done through a computer.
Yeah.
I think also I was talking to an organisation about employee branding the other week, and we said, one of the things that they've started doing more of is exit interviews when people leave, but they've got months worth of data that they just haven't had the time to look at, because that ultimately could inform a lot of information around what you can be doing to sort of counter those viewpoints in the recruitment, marketing and employer branding side, but no one's reviewing that. So actually being able to feed that into an AI program that's going to then take all of that time away from you, review it, deliver insights and actually give you potential actionable, and then that's where the people come in and to deliver and execute on that.
Data is one of the biggest problems of any HR function.
Yeah,
most HR functions have, I was going to use rude words then, but has a hell of a lot of data, and it's either broken in terms of systems aren't talking to each other, or it's out of date, or, as you touched on, the HRBP or the end user just don't have enough time to crunch it. They're using AI to aggregate and pull all this data together to produce a synopsis, to then give the business leader, the HRBP leader, or whatever else, to then take forward and make strategic decisions. Is for me the number one opportunity to elevate the HR functions. The challenge, like I keep coming back to, is that end user arguably has to be even better in terms of driving insights from data. Even though they didn't do it themselves or don't need to do it themselves, they need to be even better at understanding insights from data than if they would work in that data themselves. To take that data, and if you don't notice that, AI is still, we're still learning our ways through it. It still makes mistakes, and they need to be able to understand it and spot that glaring error before they take to the business and lose the credibility within the first 10 seconds.
So I was going to ask about how in reality does a dynamic TA function look, but I feel like we've kind of covered that. So I'm actually going to go off and ask a slightly different one. What would you
quickly answer? It's like some FTEs and loads of rec hub embedded talent.
I think that's how sure. In short,
but basic. I think a lean, not lean like it has to be tiny, but an in-house function that's built against your business as usual. And then you've got the levers to flex up and flex down. But we've got to get away from this mindset where in-house is king. And everything else sucks, and we also got but I also don't believe on the flip side that it should be fully outsourced. It's about having this hybrid.
I also love the concept of the dynamic, whether it's because it's not just embedded. We're obviously an embedded provider, but there are, like you say, there's agency, there's full RPO, there's a whole range of dynamism that you could add to your team. And it's also going to bring the entire talent acquisition world together more. We're seeing lots of communities. We're a part of the talent community, the TTC. There's lots of the IHR. There's lots of these other communities which are bringing people together. And what that's doing is increasing or decreasing skills gaps between different types of TA.
Yeah.
It's helping, external, whether that's agency or embedded, understand the mindsets of internal recruiters and leadership. And that's only going to elevate the overall, opportunity for the entire sort of industry as a whole, I think.
It's super exciting.
Yeah.
I think it's the most exciting, it really is shifting. We talk about TA being a strategic function, but it really is, in my view, shifting at such a pace that it really is becoming a true strategic function. The pace of change, it's so much more exciting than it was 20 years ago.
Oh,
when TA was just about operationally delivering, and your number one KPI was on time to hire, which is still important. but now you've got all these other things that you could be looking at, analyzing, and depending on the context, you might be looking at some things as opposed to others. It's a much more dynamic, interesting, and demanding. I think this is, and I know you want to go on to the next question, but one of the things that TA leaders really need to get away from is this, and this is probably actually the crux of the article that I wrote, away from this state of paralysis. And it's not just TA, I think wider HR functions. We always have this aspiration. I think HR functions, risk-averse functions, because
definitely.
a lot of it is mitigating risk on behalf of the company. It's not all of it, but it is. And therefore, as a function, we tend to look for this perfect solution all the time. And actually, perfect solution, but it's going to take you 10 years to deliver it, is suboptimal to a pretty good solution that's 70% right, but let's get delivering something. Because TA is always urgent. Yeah, it's always urgent.
Well, this is one of the notes I was making when I read your article, is that at the end of the day, if you can protect the downside, you can make more decisions quickly, and at the end, and you will see that the aggregate effect of lots of 8 out of 10 decisions will put you in good stead. You'll get it wrong sometimes, but overall, progression is better than paralysis or
progress over perfection.
That's what you said. Yeah, love it.
And I think that's a great way to end our podcast. Progress over perfection. So we're going to include a little link to Richard's article. Please check it out. Leave your thoughts and comments with it. But Richard, thank you so much for joining us. It's been really, really fun, super insightful.
Thank you.
Lots of great conversation. Rex, amazing as always. And join us next time.